You can go to my feed and share it on your feed if you wish as well.
Sounds perfect.
Go to my feed and share it on your feed. Well, good morning, everybody. Look at that. We're just a few seconds early so we can get everything settled. And I'm going to mute my phone so we don't hear continuous bing, bing, bing. I am so happy. Welcome, everybody who's here. I'm so happy that we have Corey Poirier with us this morning. Now, I've been watching this guy for a while, and he's pretty amazing. He's a multiple TEDx speaker. He started this Blue Talk. He's a founder of Blue Talks. He's a co-author of like books that have been on the Wall Street Journal, USA Today. I mean, this guy is all over the place. And he has interviewed amazing people like one of my mentor, Bob Proctor. I mean, it's truly amazing what you've accomplished, Corey.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That's so kind. And we're actually interviewing your mentor, Bob Proctor, in about 2 weeks inside our Influencer Vault. So you'll be able to check that out.
Woohoo! Which I have joined. We'll tell you about this a little bit later because Corey started something pretty amazing that I have personally joined because it can create a lot of amazing opportunity. I have a few questions for you, Mr. Extraordinaire. Okay, first one, let's go way, way back. When did you know that you wanted to be a speaker?
Wow. So if I can, I'll give a unique answer to this, Brigitte. I don't know, whenever I started as a speaker, I don't know that I wanted to be a speaker. So I'll explain that in more detail because the truth is it's a very unique situation. So I was originally, I got kind of, I say jokingly, but true, I got tricked into performing stand-up comedy. And so when that happened, I didn't want to be speaking in public. I didn't want to be on a stage. And so I went anyway to this club. I didn't know we were going to be performing that night. I begrudgingly decided to get up on that stage and perform. And so none of that was planned. And I had a horrible night, like I bombed comedy horribly. But I went back the next week and I kept going back week after week. And then somebody told me, I went to an event with Tony Robbins' event, and somebody said, "Can you believe he's getting paid to speak at this event?" And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, people get paid to do this? And that's what kind of opened up my mind about this being a possibility. But it's kind of like, when did I know is probably after I'd already been speaking. If you include the comedy side, I had already been tricked into it. I didn't know I wanted to do it. And I ended up doing it and enjoying it. But it certainly wasn't, some people have that moment, like that aha moment, like, you know what I want to do with my life? I want to be a speaker. And that's not what happened for me. Again, for me, it was, I get tricked into this, but I actually got something from it and I wanted to explore it more. And then after I had explored it for a bit and really enjoyed it, and this being the comedy, then when I discovered that you could actually get paid to share your message with people, I wanted more of that. And I will say the link between the two, because sometimes people could say, well, that's two different things. Comedy is entertaining people. The other one, you're entertaining, but you're also educating. But for me, I actually saw it differently. I saw what I was doing at comedy. And by the way, even when I had a horrible night and got no laughs, what I saw was I was helping that person escape from the crappy day that they had. So some of the people in the audience may have been carrying work with them. And whether they got to watch me have a train wreck up there and they got to laugh at that, or whether I delivered and got laughs, either way, they weren't thinking about their day. So I saw it that way. So maybe I viewed comedy different, which is what allowed me to compare it to speaking, because I felt as a speaker, part of my job was to, and is to educate the people in the room or to deliver on whatever the meeting planner wants. But part of my job also is to entertain people there and help them escape their day. So that's kind of the long story of saying I didn't really know I wanted to be, but that's what happened and how I became a speaker. Oh, I think I can't hear you. Are you on mute?
So were you this kind of kids that when the teacher said, okay, we're going to do a presentation in front of the class, you'd be like, yes? Or were you one of those teachers like, oh no?
I was the third kind, the kind that didn't show up that day. I would I would get my mother to write, and I'm not joking about this. I remember once, I don't think I did it every time because they would spring it on you, but there was once I remember we had to prepare a presentation. What I had to do is I had to go interview a local, well, we all had to go interview a business owner and learn about business. And so I went and did the interview with the business owner, but then the day we were supposed to present, I got my mother to write me a note, and I was worried they might try to make me like do it the next day or whatever. So basically, what we did was said that he can't go in for a couple of days because he's got laryngitis. And then basically that way I wouldn't be able to speak. So then when I went in, I spoke softly, and I left it so long that like maybe 5 or 6 days, so that the teacher eventually just said, oh, well, he won't do his. So I was the third kind. I didn't. So it tells you I was closer to the second than the first. The person that didn't raise their hand, the person that didn't say, I can't wait to speak on Monday. I was not that person at all.
No, because I mean, everybody in my house is like crazy extrovert, except for my one daughter who is mortified of, and she actually talked her teacher into having her do a presentation just to her. So there's still hope for her.
Yes, 100%. I love that.
Because there's a lot of people, they think like, I'm way too shy, I'm too much of an introvert, there's no way I could ever do this. But if you try, sometimes just like what happened to you, you discover that, wow, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So when you do a speech, what's the best thing that somebody can say to you, or what has been the best thing that anyone has ever said to you after you speak?
I love that question. And to be honest, if I'm thinking back through my memory bank, I don't think I've been asked that question before. So thank you. I've shared what the person has said, like what has been the best thing people said to me, but I don't think anybody's asked me that question. And so there's two answers to this. One is immediately after when somebody walks up, and I'm going to give you the specific situation because I could just randomly say when somebody says something like this, but I actually remember a specific situation. And every talk you deliver, if you over deliver, if you work hard to over deliver and stuff like that, you're going to have people come up and say certain things. But this one lady came up, and I remember she had tears in her eyes. And what it spoke to her as I talked about being raised by a single mother, and how my mother and I was, whenever my mother was making these decisions, like you can't have this, you can't do that, I was like, how dare she? And, mad at her and stuff like that. And, it's hard to be a single mother. And so I didn't know it at the time until now I'm a parent. So I didn't know at the time until multiple years later that my mother was probably thinking, I'm not going to be loved. I'm making these rough decisions, and I'm going to have to make the parent decisions, and I'm not his friend and all that. Now my mother is close as can be. I'm an only child. And so I shared that, you know what, I know you're making these tough decisions that may not seem like they're going to appreciate it, and they may not right now, but I think most kids will grow up appreciating the sacrifice you had to make. And I shared that story, and the lady came up with tears in her eyes and said, I'm going through this right now. Thank you for sharing that, because, I am wondering if my kids will understand why I made these decisions. And so that, that's one moment what comes to mind. And then because you use the term after a talk. So after a talk, of course, can be after that day too. So one of the things I remember somebody said to me that it was one of these invisible impact moments. I did a talk for high school, didn't know I had an impact on her at all. And we connected on LinkedIn. Like, I think she reached out and connected. And this was like maybe 4 years after the high school talk. And she said, I just wanted to thank you for giving me the kick in the butt I needed to continue with school, because now I run, I'm the branch manager for 3 rental car companies. And that wouldn't have happened had you not done that talk at our school. So I've had moments like that after talks when somebody said, I don't know if you saw tears in my eyes and stuff like that. But that one, like it's so results driven. Like, here's somebody, she said, and we went further in the conversation, and she said, I know I wouldn't have been able to achieve this or do this without following down the path. And she said, I know I wouldn't have followed that path. And I said, well, honestly, somebody else could have came into your life and given a message. Like, I'm not saying I was the only do to do that, but to know that that's the impact I had a few years later, that sticks with me often. And by the way, I often do get asked, what do you do before you get on the stage to not be nervous? And I used to meditate, but the problem with that is oftentimes you're sitting with the meeting planners. It's hard to sit there and meditate while you're sitting across from them, or to go and hide somewhere and meditate, because then they wonder, is he leaving? Is he going to be up on the stage? And they get panicked. So now what I do, because I have less time, now what I do is I actually remind myself of one of those comments or testimonials. And what that does is it reminds me, this is why you're doing it. It's about them, not you. Get out of your own head. And that's how I start every talk now. So that's what stuck in my mind. And those are the things I remind myself whenever I'm about to deliver a talk.
Yeah, I think that's a sign of a good speaker, right? Because you do it because you want to give, not because you want to be in the limelight. Like you really want to give to people. So let's switch gear a little bit. I want to talk about TEDx because, well, a lot of my followers are speakers or aspiring speakers, storytellers. How did you score your first TEDx? And give us some hints on how we can make that happen.
So two great questions, because the answer is dramatically different. Because the first one I delivered, I didn't know really what the process was. I didn't know how to go about it. Like I didn't know any of the things that I know now. I mean, now I've done three and reverse engineered them and figured out what I did and all that kind of stuff. So now I know stuff that I wouldn't have known when I did that first one. How I landed the first one was unique as well. So what happened was I heard about this thing called TEDx. I applied for this one event, and they basically told me they liked my application. Now I did some extra things that most people don't do. Like I reached out in Facebook as well. I just didn't go do the application, but they said, we like your application, but we had just closed the doors, and they hadn't updated the website to say that on the applications. And they had already kind of selected, let's say 10 speakers out of maybe, I don't know how many applicants, probably 300 or 400, because it was a smaller TEDx event. Some of the events can have over 2,000, but let's say that one was 300. So your odds are still low because, you're talking, what's that, 3% or something. But having said that, they closed the doors. It worked out well for me because that meant they already went through the ones they didn't want and selected the 10. And they said, we really love your talk though, so can we at least reach out for next year? Or can you reach out or what have you? And then what happened was about a week later, I got a message saying, hey, one of the speakers had to back out and we don't have time to go back through the applications. Are you interested? And so I got really lucky, but luck is an operative word because there's a lot of work that goes into becoming lucky. So what I'm getting at is that I did reach out separately. I did make a connection. They did remember me because of that. My talk was the 5 weeds you must pull from your life. And they were around a certain theme and they felt that fit within the theme. So there were a lot of things that worked in my favor. But how I landed that first one is not the advice I'd give people to your second part of your question, Brigitte. So that's the first part, how I landed it. There's so many different things that I could share with people about how to land one. And in fact, as you know, we have a program, a branded talk program to help people with this because there are so many things you can do. I call them shortcuts or hacks. But what you're ultimately trying to do, I told you the percentages. So realistically, at a large TEDx event, your odds are less than 1%. Let that sink in for a sec. That's pretty low, which is why you see people say, I've applied 20 times, I'm still not getting selected. And when I say that, what I mean is 2,000 applicants come across the desk for 10 spots. So they might know 3 or 4 of the people. So automatically now it's down to 6 spots. And yours, if you don't have a national news story and somebody else does. So all of a sudden you can see where your odds get really low. So what we're trying to do is give you all those extra things that increase your odds. And there's a whole bunch of them you can do. And our goal is to get it to around 80%, meaning that in theory, if you applied for 2, you should land 1. Now, having said that, I'll give you a couple of little hacks. So one, people don't think about at all, which is the fact that automatically, if you're in a large city, you're thinking, I should apply for the TEDx event in my city. But again, what you're probably not factoring in is if you're in a large city and it's a large TEDx event, they get more applicants. So your odds are, like I say, less than 1% perhaps. What if you looked and seen where the local TEDx's are nearby and there's a little rural place an hour away where they might get 100 applicants? All of a sudden, for 10 spots, you've just increased your odds from less than 1% to 10% simply by applying at a smaller TEDx event. And the key thing about that is people forget and they think that, oh, it matters if I'm at TEDx New York. I'm sorry, it doesn't, because when people say Corey's a TEDx speaker, they don't say he spoke at TEDx, whatever. You don't even know which city they are probably, unless you watch my videos. So the truth is people just say he's a TEDx speaker. So it doesn't matter if you're at a small one. So why not go to a smaller one to increase your odds? Now, you may have reasons why not. Like you might want a better chance of the video going viral. You think there's a better chance of more people seeing it because it's a larger and they have a more following, bigger following. All those things are true. So you might say, hey, this is not the way I want to go, but I'm saying that's an option. Another thing that'll increase your odds is how you answer the questions. So if you understand the way TEDx organizers think, you will increase your odds. So for instance, I'll give you an actual, for instance, a lot of people get caught up on a question like, how often have you delivered this talk and how comfortable are you delivering the talk that you're applying with? And now, so most people would think, because of the word how comfortable, TEDx wants to know that you've delivered it many times to know that you're comfortable delivering on a stage. It couldn't be further from the truth. 90% of the time, the TEDx organizer, they're wanting to launch a new talk into the stratosphere, and they want to know nobody else has seen it. So first of all, they don't want a talk that's been delivered multiple times, usually. Secondly, if you're already a TEDx speaker, they don't want to know that. I shouldn't say they don't want to know it. It's going to hurt you if you tell them that, because they're wanting to bring new people into the TEDx world. Third part is they're not looking for motivational speakers. So if you go on and on about how great a speaker you are, it could hurt you. They're okay with somebody who they're coaching who's never been on a stage. So all of that is counter to what we think when we're applying for any kind of talk. And so what I'm getting at is it's those kind of things. If you know how they think, then you don't just disqualify yourself without knowing, simply by saying, I'm a great speaker and I've spoken this talk 50 times. And I will say, one organizer I spoke to, I think it was TEDx Wilmington, told me they turned down 99% of the applicants based on how they answered the first question. So now think about that. If you know how to answer that question, now instead of competing against 2,000, you might be competing against 100 for 10 spots. So those are two, and what's that, like 3 minutes? Those are two I can give you, but I want people to know there are many, many, many. And each one of them basically is designed to increase your odds.
Yeah, that's actually how you came on my radar, is that you help people score a TED Talk. And yeah, that's fascinating. You see, it's very counterintuitive. Like I would have thought exactly what you said the other way. Like the more experience, the more motivating, the more you've done it, your chances go up. So that's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that with us. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that TED program that you have? It's like it's a standalone program that you've created for people?
Yeah, and so we call it the Branded Talk program because obviously there's other branded talks besides TEDx. We often circle back to talking about TEDx because that's the one everybody wants to land. That's the one that's most known. And I won't go into too far detail because I don't want to bring us too many directions, but we have Blue Talks. So that's a whole other thing. And I've often said it's like a mix between TEDx and Chicken Soup for the Soul. If they had a baby, we'd be the baby. But so there's Blue Talks as a branded talk. There's also Goalcast. There's Mind Valley. So there are other ones. But to go back to your question, it is a standalone program. People essentially, it's an 8-week program. And so there's two components. There's pre-recorded and then live. And so the pre-recorded is basically, we teach you the whole process so that by the time we get into we do live Q&As, we do a TEDx challenge, which is actually applying with me in real time, which that's when we notice our spikes go up for people landing them. It's because they're seeing the whole process in a real world glimpse. So that's part of it as well. So there's live and a pre-recorded part. The pre-recorded is the 8 weeks, but really for me, that's getting your head around it so you know the whole idea. But also we share things that you should be doing before you ever apply. So for instance, I would say if a person was working with us, they'd want to probably start 2 months rather, 8 weeks before they actually are ready to apply. And I didn't pick that number because of the program. I told people that before that. It's because there's a few things you have to do, and it's going to take you probably 2 months to, for example, building relationships. Some of that stuff's going to take more time than just a day or a week. And so that's usually what we recommend. And the other thing a lot of people don't know is if you want to land a TEDx, I'm just going to use an example. People will say, well, I don't need to look into that now because I don't want to, I want to have my TEDx video in 6 months. And I'm like, you're already behind. So in other words, if you're saying to yourself, well, I want to land one before the end of the year, you're probably already pushing it. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, you got to learn the process. But let's say you don't want to go that route and you do it on your own. You're applying randomly. Let's say you get super lucky and you land one within a month or two. So let's just use 2 months. You land it in 2 months. Then, Brigitte, what happens is they're not looking for the speaker for the next day. They're probably looking for I'm going to say at the earliest, probably 3 months from now. Like 3 months from when you land it. That's when the event's going to happen. So now you're 5 months. You started 2 months, you got the talk, then it's scheduled for 3 months from now. Then you deliver the talk. I've seen the TEDx talks take as long as 4 or 5 months to hit the TEDx website. And a lot of them don't go on the website, or YouTube, whichever one. So now you're at 11 or 12 months from the day you started to get it out. And I assumed early for those, like it could take you 4 months landed. It could, the event could be a year out. So what I'm saying is, if people do really want to land one, and they want to land one, let's say in this year, you already should be starting, whether you're working with me or somebody else. But the program is designed basically so that you don't have to learn the whole process. And the idea there, it's the same reason you would invest in a coach to coach you how to do something that You don't want to fall in all the manholes and trenches we've all fallen in to do it. You want somebody else to say, you know what, Brigitte, you just jump over that manhole there. You don't have to fall in that one and take another 6 months off your life doing that. And, you know, for me, what I teach is how to become an influencer, how to get on more stages, how to get your message out. But I don't teach on, for example, personal branding. And so if I wanted to learn more about personal branding, I'm going to hire a coach. If I want to learn more about peak performance, I mean, I feel I've been doing this long enough that I feel I'm okay in that area. But what I'm saying is I'm going to hire a coach. If podcast production, I don't know how to do that. Well, I'm not going to, yeah, I know how to do it in a basic scale, but I don't know how to, if I had a show with 8 guests, how to produce all that. I'm going to hire somebody. So it's the same kind of thing. Some people will go it on their own. And some people say, I need to hire somebody because I need to know the process and I don't want to spend a year learning the process, applying and getting no after no. I will say our student that landed her talk the quickest, she's the poster child and you know her, is Kelly Filardo. She landed her first TEDx talk 4 hours after signing up for a program. And she landed her second one 4 months. That's a record, by the way. I don't know I'm not sure if anybody will beat it, but she landed a second one in 4 months. So she had been trying for a while. And all of a sudden, within 4 months, she was a multiple time TEDx speaker. And then we had one person, her name is Tasia Valenza, who's an Emmy award-winning voiceover artist. She wanted to land one for 7 months, signed up with somebody, it didn't work out. Long story short is I went and sat at her table in LA with her because I happened to be in town. We applied and she landed the first talk a week after applying.
Yeah.
She never applied.
Yeah, so I'm actually, that's something, you know, that I've come to grips with. I'm in the Bob Proctor program, and it's really about, you know, you're here, your goal is to be here, and it takes so long to get there. But if you start acting like you're already there, such as spending the money and hiring people to help you take there, things just start happening like crazy. The other thing I want to talk, so I attended one of your events not too long ago, and you talked a lot about being a big advocate for putting on your banners or social media or whatever as seen on. And it made me realize, oh my gosh, like, I mean, I've been on CTV and Global and, you know, about my book and Women Talk, and I never, ever put that anywhere. And I just kind of went, duh. So tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I'd love to. And there's 2 areas there because I'll tell you a second part, which I didn't mention, I don't think on the event you're talking about. I'll tell you the second part first. So another place people don't make use of fully is their email signature. And that could be, and I'll go further than email signature and say all your social media profiles, like what do you have there written about your about me? But the reason, the one that I think is the most valuable as far as that is the email signature. And the reason is because everybody's always saying to me, how do you stand out amongst the noise? How do you stand out with so many people doing so much? And your email signature is one of the few places where if somebody's reading your email, they're not distracted. So it's their undistracted time. So they're going to see. Now, most people only look at it once. So it's the first time is most important. But I have mine always there because there's always new people reading it. But I will say I've gotten paid bookings solely because of stuff in my email signature. For instance, my Blue Talk at Harvard. It says, check out my Blue Talk at Harvard, and it's the video. And I've had people hire me and pay me my fee, my regular fee, because of watching that video. We weren't even talking about them hiring me as a speaker. So the email signature, and by the way, you can put the banner we're going to talk about. You can make a small one and put it there if you want. So I would just say, make sure you're taking advantage of your email signature. And then much more onto that, what you call the as seen on banner. Is, you know, it's what you mentioned and what I call it too. So the as seen on banner, some people might be listening saying, what is that? And I mean, it's basically, it kind of explains itself, but let me explain it further. When you go to Tony Robbins' website, when you go to JJ Virgin's website, when you go to Bob Proctor's website, when you go to Les Brown's, and I could drop name after name, Jack Canfield, I'm going to bet you almost every one of them, like I'm going to say like 95%. I mean, if we had time, we could test this in real time, I bet. But 95% plus of those thought leaders have an as seen on banner. So, you know, when you look at that, so for example, Bob Proctor, Jack Canfield, I'm going to argue and say, and I don't know if you would agree with me, this, Brigitte, but they know a few things. They've been doing this a long time. Why do you think they all have an as seen on banner? Like this isn't a coincidence. So my first thing is the takeaway is you should have it. And the reason is that, you know, these top influencers wouldn't invest time and take up their precious space on their website if it wasn't paying dividends. So why does it pay dividends? The same reason Academy Award-winning actor gets somebody to watch a movie they wouldn't watch otherwise. So it's basically, it gives them credibility. So here's what I'm suggesting. This is low-hanging fruit that nobody's doing. So, and you don't get that often. So how can you stand out when people go to your website? Imagine if they went to your website and are considering hiring you as a coach. And the first thing they see is Rebecca Smith has been seen and featured on Forbes, Entrepreneur, the OWN Network, and such. Do you think, and I mean, you don't have to answer this question, or you can in the chat if you want, but do you think the odds increase that that person's going to see you as a credible expert when they read that? Now, I've studied this and I know it's a yes. Now, there's going to be always that 1% where they're like, look at them bragging or whatever. There's always going to be 1% that doesn't fit. But the majority of people are going to go, wow, this person is somebody I need to watch or listen to or what have you. Whenever people say at an event, and Corey's a multiple-time TEDx speaker, the people in the room, I'm not joking, about 70% of the people in the room turn their head and look at me at that point. Like they're watching the MC until they hear that. It adds credibility. So what I'm suggesting is you can get that same credibility without having to apply for your TEDx yet. I mean, I think you should want to have a TEDx because it's what the video can do. But my point as far as the credibility of it. So here's why most people don't do it. Is because they see it on Jack Canfield's page. They see it on Tony Robbins' page and they say, well, I haven't been on Ellen yet. I haven't been on Oprah. I can't do it, I guess. I'll just wait until I have it. And that's if they even notice at all that it's influencing them. But what I'm suggesting is where are the rules that you have to wait? So what I'm going to tell you is a hack for how you can have your as seen on banner in less than 30 days. And by the way, for free. So what you can do is realize, first of all, you don't need the Ellen, the Forbes, all that stuff yet. That could, and by the way, your banner can be an ever evolving thing. Mine says a lot of those things now, like Forbes and Entrepreneur and what have you, but it didn't. In fact, when you put the picture up, I think you included my banner here. It's on the picture that you included. You can see the place that says now Roku, Apple TV and stuff. Well, that isn't how it started. So what I'm suggesting is find smaller, let's say, podcasts where you can actually get an interview and get a logo and start building your as seen on banner. I'm going to go one step further and say, here's a hack for how you can do that. There's a website called radioguestlist.com. There's multiple ones, but this is the one I always share because it was the one that worked for me. But it's called radioguestlist.com. You go to that website and for free, sign up for the newsletter, which is on the right-hand side of the page. It's going to send you, and by the way, that could change from the time we're talking, but it was right-hand side. Sign up for free. They're going to send you an email every day with opportunities to be interviewed by people that are looking to interview you, which means they're going to be looking for people that are newer as well. So now what I'm going to suggest is be active. For the next 10 business days, apply for all 5 every day. And you might not even have to continue through 10 days, but let's say you did, and there's 50 that you could apply for. 5 a day, 10 days. So what I'm going to suggest is you're going to get at least 1 in 5, even if you're newer. As long as you have a good story, as long as you can pitch a little bit, you're going to get, say, 1 out of 5. Somebody who's been doing this a while will probably land 3 or 4 out of 5. But let's say you get 1 out of 5. So now you have 10 interviews scheduled after 10 days. So now the next 2 weeks, the next 10 business days, I'm going to argue that you could get 10 interviews done because most podcasters pre-record. And the ones that are looking actively are probably looking to record them soon. So let's say you did 1 a day. So you're only doing 1 interview a day, a half hour a day. And so basically what I'm saying is in those next 10 days, so now you're by the 30 days I mentioned, you get 10 interviews done. You ask those podcasters for their logos. You now have 10 logos for your as seen on banner. I mean, you don't need 10, but I'm just saying if you want 10. The great part about podcasting, there's 1.5 plus million podcasts in the world. What that means is most people don't pay attention to how big a podcast is. So when they see your logos, they just assume you were vetted for a great show. And so the last part to this, and this is the only part where you may have any cost at all, so you could do this free, is the designing of the banner. I'm not that guy. So if you don't know how to design a banner, I'm going to give you a really low cost way to do it. If you know how to design a banner, everything I just told you is free. But if you don't know how to design a banner, you can actually hire somebody from Upwork or Fiverr or 99 Designs for less than 25 bucks and get a gorgeous banner done that now you can place on your website. You can use it on Facebook as your banner, LinkedIn as your banner, YouTube as your banner. You can put it in your website, and it's going to gain you credibility and up-level your credibility in 30 days for free or 25 bucks. So that's the as seen on banner.
And there's so many opportunities out there now. Now, as many of my followers know, my wife is a radio announcer. So I want your opinion, radio versus podcasts.
It's funny. I just asked this question yesterday, and it was the first time I've been asked that question in a long time. And so my answer is always, it depends, Brigitte. And one thing you'll discover with me and people listening to me is I'm not an absolutes guy, meaning I don't just give you an answer and say that's the only answer, because there's always variables. So I'm going to go one step further and say, what are your goals? And I'm going to dive into this. I'm not going to just basically deflect. I'm going to give you an actual answer, but it depends on your goals, I think, because if your goals, so I'll explain the difference. So radio, let's say drive time radio. Typically, your interview could be 5 minutes, could be longer, could be shorter, but let's say it's 5 minutes or less. If you're on global TV, it's probably going to be a 5-minute segment. And typically, they're not going to say, now global, they might on TV, radio, typically not. They're not going to say, here's Brigitte's 3 websites, here's where you can go pick up her free thing. That stuff's probably not going to happen. So what you're getting is you're getting brand awareness. And hopefully people go, I loved what she said. I'm going to Google her right now, or I'm going to go to her website. Maybe the website was dropped. But what I'm getting at is it's not as long a time. So you're not building that huge, like, I trust her now. You're building, wow, I want to learn more about her. And then they're going to go to your website. They're going to go other places and build the trust with you. Whereas with podcasting, you might get an hour. And so you're in somebody's ears in an hour. It's very intimate. And then you get a chance probably at the end to say, hey, go grab our free workbook here. And basically now you're joining my email list as well. And I can reach out to you later. So if you're a business entrepreneur who's solely saying, I want to build my business from these interviews, I would probably lean towards podcasting. But if you're, let's say, somebody whose goal is I want to run, let's say, live events in the city, and I want to have a lot of people turn up for them, then you might do radio, you might do TV as well, because you're going to maybe get more ears and eyeballs. And those people are going to, maybe take the time to research and look you up and all that stuff. So here's where it gets tough though as well, is that if you're niching, so if you're saying, I only want to reach knitters, I don't know I picked that out, somebody that knits, well, you're going to have a harder time reaching them probably through radio. But if there's a podcast called the Knitters Convention podcast, chances are you're going to hit them directly. So if you're trying to niche to a certain audience, but then again, I would say if you want mainstream awareness, most podcasts aren't going to do that unless they have a big listenership. So then I would lean to radio. So for me, it always goes back to what your goals. And the proof of that is I would do a radio spot right now, as we live and breathe, and 5 minutes later, I'd be willing to do a podcast. So my answer is, I'm not saying choosing one or the other. What I will say is that one last part you have to factor in is radio. If you're wanting to do a radio tour, the catch at 22 radio versus podcasting is the main radio stations aren't going anywhere, but radio is like there are some smaller ones disappearing, whereas podcasting is growing. So you have to factor that in. I don't think the mainstream radio stations are going anywhere. I'm just saying factor in, if you're going long haul and you're planning a long-term plan, that podcasting is growing. Like the numbers I've heard are about 15% of people that could listen to a podcast, meaning they have it on their phone, have ever listened to one. So think about the growth potential of that. How many people that have a radio in their car have ever listened to radio? I'm going to bet almost everyone. Podcasting is still growing really heavily, but here's the catch of that. That means as 1.5 million podcasts, how do you stand out? So you need to pick the shows that either have a big listenership or have raving loyal fans, even if it's only 200 people. And the last part I'll say is if you're trying to sell something on the spot, podcast listeners typically invest a lot. And they're learners, like depends on the type of show, of course, but they'll buy books. They've been showing numbers that more people that listen to podcasts on average buy a book than listen to TV or radio from the actual segment. But again, radio is brilliant at getting you brand awareness. So did I answer that question? Because I'm on the fence of both. I'm not saying either's better. I think it just depends.
Yeah, I think they're very different. The other thing I found too is radio or TV is it's very hard to control the interview. Like these guys have an objective and they take you like you have to share your message, but they'll take you, such different ways. It's like you can lose control of the interview, well, pretty much immediately.
Absolutely. I have to share this since you said that. I did an interview one time with a shock jock crew, and they pitched me, and they actually I'll correct that. They pitched my assistant at the time. And she said they showed their listenership and all that. So she's like, this is awesome. Anyway, I got on there and they didn't want to talk anything at all about what I did. They just wanted to basically brutalize me during the whole interview. And so that can happen, right? I mean, So do your research as well. This was one of those cases where I say, book me on stuff. And I was, I said to her, here's what type of shows I'm looking for. She didn't listen to the show and they had this big listenership. She goes, this is a great opportunity. I think it was like a CBS station affiliate or whatever, but it was a shock jock type, like almost like a Howard Stern type thing. Yeah, and they weren't at that level. Like they weren't crossing lines, but they were just like, hey, what do you think about this? And you start talking, they'd be interrupting you already to try to get, a laugh at your expense. So
yeah, they have their own agenda for sure.
That's the key word. agenda. And where podcasters, some have an agenda, but I think you find most podcasters want to make you look good. And it's not necessarily always because they want to make you look good. It's because selfishly that makes them and look good and also delivers value for their audience.
Yeah, they're usually a little more targeted, while radio is just about a very large audience. And yeah. So how do you score these big people, these big interviews or radio interviews? Like, how did you get yourself out there to be all over the place the way you are? Like, it's truly amazing.
Well, thank you. And I'll tell you, I'll give people an actual strategy. Like I've shared this story probably more than some other stories because I think it just sums it up really quickly. But it's all about leverage. So I'm doing, as you know, a masterclass coming up next week, and it's about, I call it activating the domino effect, because I view it this way now. I didn't at the time, but you need to strategically say what dominoes. Now, domino is the metaphor for whatever the situation is, but what domino do I have to knock down more than one domino at once? So for example, if we talk about getting big names, what big name can I get that's going to help me get the next big name? So this has been a journey. Like, this has been leveraged. So I'll post a picture of me and so-and-so, me and Henry Winkler, the Fonz, and somebody will say, oh, you're so lucky to meet the people you do. And I sometimes, every now and then, depending on my mood, I'll say, if you only knew how much work went into becoming lucky, because this has been a gradual thing. So I can't give anybody a strategy to go from scratch. I've never done an interview to in the next week interview, insert like Jack Canfield, T. Harv Eker, Bob Proctor, Marianne Williamson. I can't give you how to do that in a week from scratch. Now, I can give you one hint of something that I've done that's allowed me to get some other interviews I wouldn't have probably got. I started working on a documentary with a big name author. Now, none of that was intentional, but I recognized that I could get interviews easier based on the back of what we were doing. They wanted to, because being featured in a documentary for some is a way bigger thing than being on one podcast episode. So, if you're involved in a really big project, you can be at that really big project. That might help. But other than that, Brigitte, it's not like here's how you do it right away. But I'm going to tell you how to do it quickly, which is figure out, you might make a list. So what I did is I made a list of 100 when I started. Here's the 100 people I want to interview. And one of my TED Talks talks about the fact that today, at the time of the TED Talk, I had interviewed 93. That took like 7 years. I'm at 97 now. Now, these are really big names, but I'm at 97. I'll never get to the 100 because Seth Godin won't say yes. So he's one of the holdouts, and I don't think he's going to say yes. He's not doing interviews really much anymore. And maybe it'll happen someday, but because he said no to me so many times, it might be always a no. He might be just like, but I actually messaged him and said, look, you're one of the last ones. I tried to even appeal to that side. So who knows if it'll ever happen. Maybe if I say him enough on enough interviews, somebody will go, I'll get you the interview with Seth.
We should all start emailing him for you.
Yeah. No, don't. Well, don't tell him I said that. No. But there's two other ones. One of them has passed away. So obviously that interview can't happen. So there's a reason. So Seth's kind of the last real holdout. But the point is, made a list of 100, and then I started the process. Well, to get the first one took 4 months. And then the next one might have taken 2 more months. And
but
then,
what did you do? What did you email them?
That's the part I'm going to reveal. So this is the hack, or this is what I actually did, the physical. This is how I got the one that took 4 months. So the 4 months guy was Jack Canfield. And so I was sitting in a situation where I had a radio show. It was called Online Radio at the time, Blog Talk Radio. And I'd launched it. But I mean, I launched it. That's the operative word. It hadn't launched yet. It was about to be launched. So we had this many listeners. And I'm going out to a guy who's been on Oprah, been on Larry King Live, and saying to his team. So I'll answer how I did that. I don't even think you could do this anymore because it's probably not there. This is going back a long time. But I went to his website. I found the contact info. And it might still be there. I don't know. But I found out who was his executive assistant. So I didn't go for like the meeting, or sorry, the what's marketing person or anything like that, because they're weeding out all the time. But I thought his executive assistant talks to him all the time. But then I also CC'd in a few other people. So I sent a message and I explained why I want to interview Jack. Now I had one little bonus is I had a newspaper, but it was really small. And I had a book series. And I said, if I can interview Jack for one, I can put him in all three. So in other words, for an hour-long interview, we can get him in 3 places. But all of them were small potatoes, basically. And I'm from PEI, so I could say small potatoes officially. And so what happened was I went out to them and they said, you know what, Jack's turning down 9 out of every 10 interviews right now because he doesn't have a book out. He's not really doing a lot of interviews. And they said, so it's probably going to be a no, Corey, but we'll keep you in mind. So it's just kind of like I don't want to say a blow off, but it was just kind of like we'll see what happens. And so I tried again, let's see, every month, I think. So I started and then I tried every month for those 4 months. And I would just say, hey, wonder if anything's changed. Does Jack have a book coming out? Like I was just being, what would you call, persistent basically, but friendly. And then I happened to hear around the third month, 3.5 months, an interview with a guy named Dan Sullivan, who runs Strategic Coach. And he was being interviewed by a guy named Darren Hardy, who was the publisher of Success Magazine. So this was a CD that came out in Success Magazine I was listening to as I was driving, probably to a speaking engagement or something. And I heard Dan say, I love this interview. It's one of the best I've ever done. And then he said, Darren said, what kind of work do you do? And he said, I have an annual event. Some of my clients that come to it are Jack Canfield, Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, and Joe Polish. And so what I heard was Jack Canfield. And so he was saying, I coach him. So I'm like, okay, this is his coach. So I imagine he would listen to what his coach says. So anyway, then what I did was I reached out and started the process to interview Dan Sullivan. And I explained why I heard him on Success and he loved the interview, and that's the style of interview I did. So we got Dan on the show eventually, and Dan was a great get anyway. But when in interviewing Dan, and we hadn't aired the show yet, we were pre-recording, I brought up Jack Canfield. And he said, Corey, Jack would love this type of show. So I took that clip and cropped it. I sent it to Jack's team, and I said, even Jack's own coach thinks he should be on my show. And the next morning they messaged and said, you beaten us into submission. Jack's going to be on the show. Let's schedule a date. Now, to finish the whole story, to make it a really interesting story at the end, when we finally aired the episode, we were airing on Saturdays. The day before, he appeared on Larry King Live. The day after that, he was on Super Soul Sunday live. In between, he was on my tiny show that didn't even have any listeners yet. And that episode with Jack brought in about 5,000 listeners, which, as you know, for a brand new show that didn't exist, that's a big number. Any podcaster I know today on their first episode, actually, Jack was episode 3. But here's why I told you that whole story. First of all, it talks about how did I reach out? So I had to find the contact info. I chose to reach out to a different person than the press person. That was conscious. But then also I tried to be creative in terms of reaching out to somebody who could influence Jack to come on the show. And I didn't know it was going to happen, but I figured I'll give it a try. It can't be manipulative. I wanted Dan on the show, but here's now what I could do with that. So this is your answer to the big question, is now all of a sudden, let's say I have Jack on the show, I have Dan Sullivan on the show. So let's look at who their circle is. Well, wait a minute. Dan said that he also coaches Mark Victor Hansen. Mark Victor Hansen also co-created Chicken Soup for the Soul with Jack. Wait a minute, maybe he's the third person that I can go to him and say, hey, your two best friends were on my show. And now what I can do is I can go, okay, well, now I have Jack, Mark, and Dan. What if I go on their website and see who their testimonials are from other thought leaders? Now I can go to them. Let's say Marianne Williamson said, I love Jack. Now I can go to her and say, I know you're a fan of Jack's work. Well, I just happen to have Jack on the show. And I hope you see where I'm going, but it's leverage. Yeah. So all of a sudden, and then there's a point where now I could go and say, here's a list of 100 influencers we've had in the show. Are you interested? And what I get, this is really neat. Now what I get from people, if like, for example, Mark Victor Hansen, who I had interviewed in the past, but this documentary we were doing, Mark was slowing down in interviews because they got really overwhelmed because he was doing a lot of podcast interviews. And he probably wasn't going to do the interview, but then I put a list of who was on the documentary, and he goes, well, we want to be in the show with all our friends. That's the key thing, with all our friends. And then we interviewed Marcy Shimoff, who wrote Happy for No Reason. And she had co-written Chicken Soup for the Woman's Soul with them. And so then she saw the list. She goes, well, I want to be in this with all my friends.
Yeah. So it's like keep looking for a door. Yeah, keep looking for a door. And once you start opening doors, then all of a sudden they all start opening. Now, I know you have to go, so I want to make sure we talk about your influencer vault. What is that all about? Like, this is a brand new thing you're launching.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a pre-launch with about 100 people. That was all, again, intentional to test it out, make sure it ran smoothly. I'm going to do a knock on wood because we didn't really run into any hiccups. And so I knew it was going to be launched this month in June. So what it is basically, it's a membership site, truest of the word, but it's a membership site almost on steroids. Because, some membership sites just have, you go in and you listen to this, but ours is multi-layered. So one of the things that we do, and this has become the most popular, which I didn't expect, we did learn this, by the way, by pre-launching with 100 people, is the thing that most people get excited about, whether they sign up for it or they discover it, is the list. And people have been calling it the list. But it's a list, it's a PDF list of ongoing opportunities. So let's say you want to be on a summit. Let's say you want to be a writer in a magazine. All those kind of things, but you don't know where to reach out. And you're like, well, I got to go one by one and going, hey, do you have a spot in your summit for me? Well, what we're doing instead is those opportunities come my way or into my network somehow, somehow. And so what we're doing is, like, when somebody comes to me and says, hey, we're doing an event with Jack Canfield, Corey, do you want to be on the event? My first question is, well, my answer is yes. And how many spots do you have? Because what I want to do is I want to see if I can put it inside the vault. And so we have this ongoing list, whether you want to write for magazines, be featured on big podcasts, be featured on TEDx stages, all that stuff. We have an ongoing list where you can actually literally click and apply for those opportunities. Some of them we're personally connecting you and saying, hey, Maria, I have somebody that'd be a great fit for writing for the magazine if you're interested. And then they literally take it from there. And for example, we've had 3 magazines that we've worked with where I would say combined now, we have probably upwards of 100 writers who are writing columns for magazines from about 2 months ago from scratch. And so these are real results happening. So that's the list. Beyond that, we have the vault itself, which is classic content. So if you compare it to Netflix, the Netflix has like the shows like Friends and the stuff that's classic. Well, our classic would be the stuff that interviews I've already done around podcasting, speaking, writing. So when you go inside the core vault, it's like Netflix and there's categories. So if you go into writing, you might find Kevin Harrington's in there talking about how he launched his most recent book during a pandemic. But we also have Mark Victor Hansen saying, here's the one strategy that I use to help sell 600 million books. So what's that worth to you, right? We have Lisa Nichols talking about speaking in the speaking category. And so that's the classic content. Then we have Vault Originals, which would be stuff that's not aired anywhere else. Then here's the 2 other things that are really crucial. We have monthly training. So for those that are saying, I want to up level as an influencer, I want to know how to use LinkedIn better, I want to know how to get media spots, we're actually bringing people to do a training once a month for that. So I'm doing the first one. It's around how to build a speaking business from scratch. And this is stuff that normally would only be in my speaking program. Then we have people coming up like Kelly Filardo, which we mentioned, who's going to be talking about her bestseller strategy. Last time she did that, we had people launch their book with her strategy and they didn't even hire her. She delivered so much that they were able to do it without hiring her. And I think that's a compliment to her because she still got clients from it. But then there's also, we have Lori McNeil coming up who focuses on how to get media gigs. She's going to be talking about that. We have Shay Rowbottom coming up talking about LinkedIn. If you don't know that name, Shay Rowbottom in 18 months built a LinkedIn following of 700,000 followers from scratch. So these people know their stuff. Evan Carmichael, who has a 450 million viewed YouTube channel, and he talks about here's the hacks that you can use. So we have training, and then the last part, which is the part you and I talked about to kick it all off, is the live weekly influencer interviews. So every week I'm tapping into my Rolodex to bring you the world's top influencers so you can ask them questions in real time while you're watching them live. This Thursday, we have JJ Virgin. Next week, we have Les Brown. Week after that, we have Bob Proctor. Week after that, we have John Gray, Men Are From Mars. Do you think, these names?
That's insane that you get, that's crazy that you get all those people. And then that gives us access as members.
Yeah, and to that point, I'm not going to promise anybody anything. Like, I'm not going to say, go and this is how you connect with them. But if people are saying, how do I get access to those big names? One starter could be, if you watched Les Brown on our event, reach out and say, hey, we saw you on in the influencer vault, Les, and you mentioned this. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because what I'm saying is he's going to appreciate that you saw him somewhere, et cetera, et cetera. So, but to that, back to that point, every week we're bringing on influencers like that. Names are always going to change. I will say I'm using my favors to do this, but I'm not going to use them more than once, meaning I'm not going to go back to Bob and ask him to be back in again. It'll be a one-time thing. Now, I might ask Bob to be involved in something else, but I don't want to abuse that. And so what I will say, when people say, well, it's a membership site, so I can just join whenever. Yeah, you can, but you're only going to get to see Bob once. You're only going to get to see Les once. So that's, to me, one of the reasons to jump in earlier rather than later. And then also pricing. With something like this, I always grandfather it. So if you're in now, the price you're paying now, as long as you stay a member, it's never going to change. The other thing that we decided to do as part of and we are doing the launch right now in June, the other thing we decided to do is I have this entrepreneurship, speakerpreneurship masterclass that I recorded. It's basically 5 weeks of me talking about writing and speaking. First week, I went high-level speaking. Second week, I brought on Tom Ziegler to talk about what he learned from his father, Zig, in the speaking world. Third week, I talked about high-level writing. Fourth week, I brought in James Redfield to talk about how he wrote and sold 30 million copies of the Celestine Prophecy. Fifth week, I brought in Kelly, and that's when she revealed her whole process. And we had a guy named Woody Woodrow, who's in the 3rd largest independent band, take all Kelly's strategies, launch his book, and go #1 in 20 categories and stay there for a month.
Yeah, she's amazing.
But he said, I could have hired Kelly. I didn't even know. And Kelly's like, he didn't even know he could hire me. So she actually got a testimonial from him saying she delivered so much value. He used her whole system, but he didn't know he could have hired her to help with it. So having said that, to answer your question, basically we designed it to be this thing that can shorten this process for you. And then, like I said, I name dropped a few of the names coming up inside the vault, but it just keeps going. Like right to the rest of the year, we're already booked up.
So where do people go to find out about the vault?
Yeah, and I can tell people the price as well. I mean, I want people to have a heads up to go there. For some people, it's mind blowing because they're thinking it's going to be way more as I build it up like this. But basically, it's $44 Canadian a month, or 35. It works out to about 35 US a month, or 444 Canadian for the year. So you save a bit going for the year in advance, but that's the price. So basically, my goal, you always hear as a salesperson, for the price of a cup of coffee a day. And I said, I want to go one better. For less than the price of a cup of Starbucks a day, I want to help people get access to the type of stuff that usually is only kept for the people that are willing to spend thousands of dollars. Now, we have programs to help people do TEDx and all that, but this here, basically, in my opinion, will allow you to up level basically overnight. It's because we're putting the opportunities out there for you to go next level. So yeah, 44 Canadian, which works out to 35 US. And then where people can go to sign up for it. I don't know if you're going to put a link in, so I can tell people if you're not going to put a link in, Brigitte, but it's up to you. I don't know if you're putting a link in.
Well, I'll put it on Facebook and all that, but you can let people know. And then I'll also be posting the links on Facebook Live.
Okay, perfect. So the easiest way, rather than me giving you there's the main page where you sign up, but as you know, it's like one of those pages with a lot of stuff in it. So meaning it says you might have 20 letters. So the easier place, and this might be 20 letters too, now that I think about it, is to go to the influencervault.com. So go to the influencervault.com, but I always add a caveat. When you go there, it's going to look like a sign up page to get a copy of our insights guide, and you will get that. But basically you sign up there, just like your email and your name, and it redirects you immediately to the sales page where you can sign up. But what you also get by doing that is you get a top 10 insights guide I did before, 3 videos, and the link to sign up for our masterclass coming up next week that's free as well. So it's worth your while going to that main first page. But again, what that's going to do is it's going to redirect you to the sign up page. And then you just scroll down and you'll see the places where you can sign up and jump right in.
Yeah, so I'll put the link in Facebook and I'll email people as well so they can find you easily. But thank you. That was amazing. You just go. You're an easy interview. You just have so much information to share with people. Thank you. That was a fabulous interview.
Well, you know what? You honestly made it easy. At the end of the day, I'll just share this one last thing, but this stuck with me for a long time. Lisa Nichols said to me at the end of an interview, she said, Corey, thanks for your rich questions. And she gave me this really complimentary ending. She said, you got things out of me nobody's ever got out of me before. And I said, no, that's okay. Thank you. You made it easy. And I tried to give the credit back. And she's like, no. She said, we're doing a dance. And my questions are only going to be as good, or my answers are only going to be as good as your questions. So Brigitte, I want you to receive that as well. You made it easy and you made it look good because your questions are great. So thank you so much for great questions to make this easy for me.
Thank you. And I look forward to working with you.
Absolutely, my friend. Always a pleasure.
So go check it out. Yeah, go check it out, you guys. And like I said, I'll put the link on Facebook and I'll be emailing people as well. I think it's money well spent. Have a fabulous day and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, my friend. Thanks, everybody.